All right, managers, this one's for you. We're cracking open a playbook, pulling two very specific strategies from Robert Greene's famous, or maybe infamous, The 48 Laws of Power. We're going to see how, when you combine them, they can seriously boost your influence at work, but also how they can completely blow up in your face if you get it wrong. Let's dive in. So, here's the big question, right? The one every leader grapples with. You absolutely have to be seen, you have to be heard if you want to be effective. But the second you step into that spotlight, you can feel that target forming on your back. So how do you walk that tightrope? That's exactly what we're going to break down. Okay, let's get into our first play. Think of this as your offensive strategy. It's all about making sure you can't be ignored, making yourself a person people are paying attention to. This comes straight from law number 6, court attention at all costs.
So what's the big idea here? Well, it kind of blows up that old saying, good work speaks for itself. Because let's be real, it often doesn't. In a crazy busy office, the smartest person in the room holds zero power if no one knows they're there. This law argues that visibility is the currency of influence. Blending in isn't being humble, it's a huge strategic mistake.
And you can't talk about this without mentioning the master himself, P.T. Barnum. This quote is like the extreme version of this law. Barnum practically invented the personal brand, and he knew that just being talked about, good or bad, was way more valuable than being liked by everyone. He used controversy, he used spectacle, anything to make sure he was never, ever ignored.
Okay, but here's the crucial part, and you really got to get this right. Your office, it's not P.T. Barnum's circus. What works in that public arena, with all the big stunts, can be a total disaster at work. If you're overtly trying to steal the spotlight, you don't look influential, you just look arrogant. And that's when you start creating resentment. It takes a much, much smarter touch.
And this right here, this is the real trap. When you stand out, you can make other people feel small or like they're being passed over. And they might not say anything to your face, but they can become these silent enemies, just waiting for that perfect moment to pull the rug out from under you. That's the danger of grabbing attention without a deeper strategy. So that brings us to our second play. This is where it gets really interesting. This move is way more subtle. It's less about spectacle and more about intelligence. It's about getting a deep, real understanding of the people around you. This is Law 33. Discover each man's thumbscrew.
Now, I know what you're thinking. Thumbscrew? That sounds pretty brutal. But hang on. We're not talking about blackmail or finding some dirty secret to use against someone. Think of it more as finding the master key to a person. What really drives them? What are they secretly afraid of? What are their deepest ambitions? It's about collecting that psychological data you need to actually lead them well.
So how do you actually do this? How do you figure out what makes your team tick? Well, the sources give us a few clues. You got to pay attention to what's not being said. Watch for those little unconscious signals and look for contrasts. Is the loudest, most confident person on your team actually the one who's desperate for your approval? Could the quietest person be secretly dying for a chance to take the lead? Finding those hidden insecurities and desires is everything, because that's where the real motivation lies. So we have two plays on the board: command attention and understand motivations. Now, on their own, they're incomplete, maybe even a little dangerous. But when you put them together, that's where the real power is. That's the strategy. And here's the whole point. The intelligence you gather from understanding people, that's Law 33, it becomes the GPS for your attention-seeking actions from Law 6. It tells you exactly what your boss will see as valuable, what your team will see as respectable, and most importantly, what they'll see as a threat. It's the difference between being a savvy, respected leader and just being the loudest person in the room. And to really see what happens when you get this combo wrong, we need to look at a classic cautionary tale. Meet Nicolas Fouquet. He was the finance minister for King Louis XIV of France. The guy was brilliant, he was essential, and he had a fatal blind spot when it came to understanding his boss. So Fouquet feels like he's falling out of favor and he decides to use Law 6. He's going to grab the king's attention by throwing the most incredible party Europe has ever seen. And you know what? He succeeded. He got tons of attention, but it was the absolute worst kind. See, King Louis XIV was a man whose entire world revolved around his own ego. Fouquet's party was so amazing, so grand, that it actually made the king look bad. He completely outshone his master. He nailed Law 6, but he failed catastrophically at Law 33. He never understood the king's #1 thumbscrew, his vanity. The result? He was arrested the very next day and spent the rest of his life in prison.
Okay, now, before we wrap this up, we need to put a big, bold warning label on all of this. These ideas are potent, and with this kind of knowledge comes some very serious ethical responsibility.
Look, not everyone's a fan of these ideas, and for good reason. Critics, like Stanford professor Jeffrey Pfeiffer, say the laws aren't really based on solid research. They're just cherry-picked stories from history. Others point out that some of the laws totally contradict each other. And hey, even the author, Robert Greene, has said that anyone who actually followed all 48 laws would be a pretty horrible human being.
And if you need any more proof of how seriously this stuff is taken, get this. In the entire Utah prison system, only 2 books are banned for every inmate by name. And guess what? Both of them are by Robert Greene, including the 48 laws. The reason? Officials were worried they weren't just theory. They're basically instruction manuals for manipulation.
So we end with this. This is the question you have to ask yourself. Understanding what makes people tick and managing how you're perceived. These are absolutely essential skills for any leader, but it all comes down to how you use them. Is this knowledge a tool to build your team up, to guide them, to inspire them, or is it a weapon you use for your own personal gain? At the end of the day, that choice is yours.